Hello and welcome back to Real Talk, the podcast where we dig into the films you know and love, or sometimes the ones that leave you scratching your head, wondering what exactly went wrong. I'm your host, Josh Bell, and today we're continuing our journey through the twisted, imaginative, and darkly enchanting universe of Tim Burton. Now today's episode is all about Alice in Wonderland, Burton's 2010 take on Lewis Carroll's classic tale. Carroll's Alice is known for her curious heart, her boundless imagination, and her journey through a world that defies all logic. Burton's Alice? Well, she's older, a bit more disillusioned, and thrust back into Wonderland, or Underland as it's called here. With a sense of destiny hanging over her head, it's a fascinating twist on a story we all know, where Wonderland becomes less about whimsical nonsense and more about destiny, danger, and self-discovery. And as with so much of Burton's work, Alice in Wonderland is visually stunning, filled with his signature gothic style, surreal landscapes, and eccentric characters. But what's the verdict on this journey to Wonderland? Was it an inspired reimagining of a beloved story? Or did it get lost in this fantastical maze of CGI, quirky characters, and Burton's distinct style? We will look at what exactly makes Alice in Wonderland such a unique and sometimes divisive piece of Burton's filmography. We will look at why this movie, which brought in over $1 billion worldwide, has left some fans enchanted and others underwhelmed. And what does it say about Tim Burton as a director? Let's dive down that rabbit hole and see what the hidden wonders and few disappointments are awaiting us. Let's start with a quick rundown of the story. In Alice in Wonderland, we meet Alice Kingsley, who's now 19 years old. She's no longer the curious little girl from the classic tale, but a young woman struggling to find her place in a world where she doesn't quite fit. This time, her journey down the rabbit hole takes her back to Wonderland, or as we mentioned, Burton reimagines it as Underland. Alice is thrust into a landscape that is far from whimsical world that she may have remembered. Instead, here it's an eerie, almost decaying realm that feels equal parts fantasy and nightmare. Along the way, she encounters a cast of wonderfully bizarre characters: the Mad Hatter, portrayed by Burton's longtime collaborator Johnny Depp, who is as unpredictable as ever; the Red Queen, whose enormous head and short temper are matched only by her need to be in control; the White Queen, a peaceful yet slightly off-kilter contrast to her sister; and of course, the enigmatic Cheshire Cat, who drifts in and out of scenes with a surreal, haunting grin. As Alice navigates Underland, she learns of a prophecy that marks her as the Chosen One, who must defeat the monstrous Jabberwocky and restore peace to the land. But there's a catch. Alice herself isn't sure she's the right Alice for the job. This self-doubt becomes central to Burton's adaptation, transforming the story from a mere adventure into a journey of identity and purpose. She has to decide here if she'll embrace her role or continue to feel like an outsider. This quest for self-discovery and the pressure to conform to expectations are themes that Burton loves to explore, and Alice in Wonderland here is no exception. Here, Underland serves as a gothic, sometimes grotesque mirror to the pressures Alice faces in real life. From the twisted landscapes and stormy skies to the exaggerated, slightly distorted proportions of the characters, Burton's Underland is no longer a world of whimsy and more a place where dark fairy tales come to life. It's visually compelling, but the film leans heavily into the darker, grander interpretation, sometimes at the expense of the lighter, nonsensical charms of Carroll's original story. So while we're following Alice's journey to self-acceptance and courage, Burton's take on Wonderland makes it clear that this isn't the familiar place of childhood dreams. This is a shadowy realm where each character and setting reflects some of Burton's more signature elements: misfits, darkness, and the line between fantasy and reality. Next up, we have Tim Burton's distinct style here in Alice in Wonderland. This movie is an ambitious visual feast and plays to many of Burton's stylistic trademarks. From the first scene in Underland, we're thrust into a gothic dreamscape, dark, twisted forests, towering, eerie castles, and characters with outlandish makeup and costumes that look like they've stepped straight out of a surrealist painting. These elements bring an almost haunting beauty to Wonderland. It's a place that feels both familiar and foreign, where every shadow hides a secret and every corner seems slightly off. Burton's version of Wonderland leans heavily on CGI mixed with live action, and while it allows for some very breathtaking and otherworldly landscapes, it also is what gives the film its distinctly Burton-esque melancholy. Unlike the vibrant, colorful versions we may remember from childhood adaptations, particularly Disney's, this Wonderland is painted in darker, muted tones. The colors feel subdued, and rather than the bright whimsy we associate with Wonderland, there's an almost somber undertone. A reminder that this is a place of nightmares as much as it is of dreams. One of Burton's greatest strengths as a filmmaker is his ability to make audiences feel like outsiders. And here, Alice in Wonderland leans into that sense of alienation. Alice herself is the ultimate misfit. She doesn't quite belong in her Victorian reality, where her family pressures her to conform and follow a predictable path, nor does she seem to fully belong in Underland, which insists she fulfill a destiny she's unsure she even wants. Burton uses this story to explore the blurred line between fantasy and reality, questioning where one ends and the other begins. And the fantastical realm of Underland becomes the perfect metaphor for those feelings of displacement and the universal journey of figuring out where, or even if, you fit in. But while Burton's signature themes of identity and childhood fears shine through, they're somewhat clouded by the film's reliance on heavy CGI. Burton's dreamlike storytelling often thrives in simplicity, and here, a lot of that is lost. Scenes that could feel truly magical are overshadowed by an overwhelming digital clutter, leaving us searching for focus in the middle of a highly stylized but chaotic world. It's like Burton tried to take every ounce of strangeness in Carroll's original story and crank it up. But somewhere in that process, the sense of magic gets all tangled up with the spectacle. There are, however, glimpses of that signature Burton-esque dreamlike feeling that make the film compelling. Scenes where Alice wanders through the foggy landscapes, encountering odd characters who all seem to have a purpose in guiding her. These moments resonate as classic Burton, where darkness and wonder can coexist. But as a whole, Alice in Wonderland really feels like it's teetering on the edge of Burton's strengths and falling into his weaknesses, trying to balance enchantment with an overwhelming style that is at times fascinating, but often just a bit exhausting. Let's break down the performances, which bring both high points and some puzzling choices to Alice in Wonderland. Johnny Depp leads the cast as the Mad Hatter, and he certainly brings his flair. Depp's Hatter is strange, mercurial, and occasionally unsettling. His performance here teeters between that whimsical and intense, and it gives the character an edge that feels uniquely Burton-esque. But sometimes it does feel like Depp leans a bit too heavy into the eccentricity, and Burton's direction often encourages his actors to embrace the odd, But here, Depp's Hatter sometimes veers into a level of quirkiness that feels kind of forced, as if he's constantly pushing to remind us of just how mad this Hatter is. And then there's Helena Bonham Carter as the Red Queen, a role that's darkly comedic and exaggerated to the max. Bonham Carter's portrayal of the temperamental, power-hungry monarch is a mix of menace and humor, with the iconic "off with their heads" delivered with gusto. She's wonderfully over the top, but at times her performance feels so exaggerated that it borders on the cartoonish, making it difficult to see her as anything more than a caricature. It's entertaining, no doubt, but it feels like her performance might have benefited from a bit more subtlety to balance the humor with a touch of grounded malice. Anne Hathaway as the White Queen is an interesting contrast to Bonham Carter's Red Queen. Hathaway's character is serene, graceful, and almost floaty in her movements. It's a portrayal that's meant to contrast starkly with the manic energy of her sister. Her performance is ethereal and soft and adds a touch of elegance to the film, but it often feels distant, as if she's watching the events unfold rather than being an active participant. Her character seems wise, yet the portrayal doesn't always convey the inner strength that would make her a true counterpart to the Red Queen's wrath. And of course, we can't overlook the return of Danny Elfman's contributions here. Elfman, as always, brings a hauntingly beautiful score that adds layers to the dark fantasy world. The music swells and drifts through the film, enhances its fairy tale atmosphere, and adds an emotional depth that grounds some of the more chaotic scenes. Elfman's score provides a much-needed touch of magic, and his music often serves as the emotional anchor for scenes that otherwise feel overwhelmed by the CGI or the exaggerated performances. However, even Elfman's mesmerizing score can only do so much to support scenes that visually or narratively don't always land. Overall, the cast is undeniably talented, and there are moments when their performances truly shine. Yet there's this sense that they're playing up their quirks to such an extreme that they feel like caricatures of themselves. It's almost as if they're all in on a secret joke that we of the audience aren't quite allowed to know about. The result is a film filled with colorful characters, but characters who sometimes are just too exaggerated to resonate with us on any deeper level. So let's take a look at the themes and symbolism that Alice in Wonderland explores, as Burton's take on the story certainly doesn't shy away from big ideas. At its core, the film is about identity, destiny, and self-discovery, classic themes that resonate across much of Burton's work. In this story, Alice's journey isn't just about exploring a fantasy world. It's about finding out who she really is and where she fits, both in her rigid Victorian life and in the chaotic world of Underland. The theme of identity is woven throughout Alice's interactions. She's constantly asked, "Are you the right Alice?" A question that embodies her own self-doubt and struggle with her place in the world. This uncertainty is something Burton loves to explore, and he often gravitates towards protagonists who don't fit neatly into societal expectations. Alice, much like Edward Scissorhands or even Ed Wood, is a misfit trying to find purpose. Her struggle is not just about fulfilling a destiny, but about embracing her own uniqueness, a recurring message in Burton's filmography. Burton also dives into themes of isolation and belonging, with Alice feeling disconnected from both her family's world and Underland. In Victorian England, she's pressured to conform and marry, yet she feels that her path lies elsewhere. Underland, though filled with oddities, doesn't immediately offer her a sense of home either. She is as much a stranger there as she is in her real life. This tension speaks to the universal feeling of being caught between two worlds, uncertain of where you truly belong. Alice's journey echoes that of many of Burton's characters, who are often outsiders learning to find strength in their differences. Yet while Alice in Wonderland introduces these profound themes, the film's heavy reliance on CGI and grand visuals often overshadows the emotional depth. Burton's Underland is a vividly surreal place, but the themes feel buried under the intense spectacle. There's an abundance of visual whimsy, but it feels as though the film is trying to say way too much through the visuals alone, leaving the emotional core a bit underdeveloped. There's also a layer of destiny at play, with Alice's prophesied role as the slayer of the Jabberwocky. This idea of a chosen one, tasked with saving a world she barely understands, adds to the film's exploration of bravery and self-determination. However, this aspect of Alice's journey is more conventional than resonant. It's almost as if it's a literal exploration, as if the film is spelling out the message rather than letting it unfold naturally through Alice's character development and the adventure she's on. Burton's visual storytelling is ambitious, yet in this film it sometimes struggles to balance spectacle with substance. The emotional impact of Alice's journey, her transition from uncertainty to self-assurance, feels drowned out by the sheer volume of visual effects and action. While Burton's aesthetic is captivating, there's a sense that the story's heart has been sacrificed in favor of its appearance. Ultimately, Burton's Alice in Wonderland is a story about embracing one's uniqueness and the courage it takes to chart your own path. The themes of isolation, self-acceptance, and bravery are all there, but they're fighting for attention amidst the digital landscapes and larger-than-life characters. It's an admirable attempt to ground fantasy in meaningful themes, yet this time the execution feels forced. Alice in Wonderland hit theaters with a bang, becoming a huge financial success and marking a milestone in Burton's career. With a staggering worldwide gross of over $1 billion, this film was one of the highest grossing of 2010 and cemented Burton's power as a filmmaker who could bring audiences in droves. This success was partly fueled by the hype surrounding the film's visual style, the appeal of 3D at the time, and Disney's marketing push. Yet, despite its popularity, Alice in Wonderland faced mixed reception among critics, sparking some interesting debates about Burton's evolution as a director. While many admired Burton's visual inventiveness and ambition, others felt that the film's heart was buried under layers of CGI and digital gloss. Critics highlighted the fact that, unlike some of his earlier work, Alice in Wonderland seemed to lack intimacy and emotional depth. The vibrant yet dark aesthetic made for a memorable experience, but some argued that it overshadowed the story and characters, making it hard to connect with Alice's journey on a more personal level. This led to division among his fans, with some celebrating it as a bold, imaginative take on a classic, and others seeing it as an overly stylized spectacle. Interestingly, over the years, Alice in Wonderland has become one of Burton's more controversial films. not for any particular storyline or characters, but for what it represents within his career. It sits in a strange place, financially triumphant, but lacking the beloved cult classic status that films like Beetlejuice or Edward Scissorhands have achieved. It's a film that highlights a shift in Burton's work, moving away from his earlier practical effects-laden style toward a heavier reliance on digital effects, which some argue dilutes the distinct handmade quality that marked his best work. Culturally, however, the film has had a noticeable impact. Its unique aesthetic left an imprint on fashion, inspiring everything from elaborate Halloween costumes to avant-garde runway collections. For years, the film's twisted and whimsical style was replicated in fan art, Tumblr aesthetics, and countless online edits, as audiences were captivated by the film's bold, gothic visuals and the allure of Underland's inhabitants. The imagery of the Red Queen with her oversized head and really tiny face, and the Mad Hatter's wild eyes and vibrant hair, and the dreamy landscapes have become instantly recognizable symbols. And despite its mixed critical reception, Alice in Wonderland reinforced Burton's influence on visual culture. It brought new life to Lewis Carroll's classic, albeit in a way that prioritized spectacle over subtlety. For better or worse, the film demonstrated how Burton could use his style to reinvent a familiar story for a modern audience, even if it left some fans wishing for the simplicity and sincerity of his earlier films. Alright, now for some behind-the-scenes stories that shaped Alice in Wonderland into the unique spectacle it has become. First off, an interesting fact about the filming process. Alice in Wonderland was shot almost entirely on green screens. Tim Burton was determined to create a Wonderland that felt surreal and otherworldly, something traditional sets wouldn't quite capture. By leaning heavily into CGI, he could build an entire world where the boundaries of reality and fantasy are blurred. It was an ambitious choice, but it also contributed to the film's distinct visual style, one that's both immersive and disorienting. It's one of those films where nearly everything you see, from the twisted trees to the Mad Hatter's tea set, was digitally constructed. This approach gave Burton the flexibility to amplify Wonderland's quirky gothic feel, but it also added to the criticism that the film felt a little too artificial. And a surprising tidbit about casting: Anne Hathaway nearly passed on the role of the White Queen. She was apprehensive about playing another fairy tale character after having done so in the Princess Diaries films. The challenge for her was to bring a fresh take to this regal, slightly ethereal character without simply rehashing old territory. Hathaway eventually found a way to make the White Queen her own, injecting a quirky, almost detached quality that plays off the darker chaos surrounding her. She took inspiration from silent film stars, bringing a unique blend of elegance and strangeness to her performance that matched Burton's vision of the character. And another fun fact, Helena Bonham Carter's iconic Red Queen look, especially her massive head, wasn't entirely CGI. Burton used practical effects like camera angles, props, and clever costume design to make her head look disproportionately large. They did enhance it digitally, but the basic effect was achieved in camera. Burton chose this technique to give the Red Queen an exaggerated, cartoonish quality, making her both menacing and bizarre. Bonham Carter's makeup and costume design also played a big role, with her heart-shaped hair and dramatic red and black color scheme giving her a look that's equal parts funny and terrifying. And Danny Elfman, who is no stranger to composing for Burton's world of oddballs and outsiders, took on the sheer scale of Alice in Wonderland as a new challenge, where his score blends whimsical fairy tale melodies with darker, more ominous themes to reflect the tone shifts in the film. The main theme, with its haunting choir and sweeping orchestration, mirrors Alice's journey into the unpredictable and sometimes dangerous world. The score is one of the elements that truly ties together the chaotic visuals and gives the film an emotional heartbeat, even when the story is a bit scattered. Another of the behind-the-scenes challenge involved working with the Cheshire Cat. Instead of relying on practical effects or puppets, Burton opted to create the character entirely with CGI to give him that ethereal, weightless quality. This allowed the Cheshire Cat to move in eerie, gravity-defying ways, disappearing and reappearing in thin air as he does in Lewis Carroll's original story. It was a decision that contributed to that surreal feel of Underland and enhanced the sense that this world is governed by its own rules. And finally, the set design for Underland was partially inspired by Salvador Dali's surrealist art. Burton drew on Dali's distorted landscapes and dreamlike imagery to help guide the look of Underland. This influence is especially noticeable in the warped, twisting trees and the haunting, endless horizon in some scenes. It's a subtle nod to surrealism that adds depth to Burton's vision of Wonderland as a place where reality is constantly bent and reshaped. And these behind-the-scenes choices and challenges give us a glimpse into the immense creative effort that went into bringing Burton's version of Alice in Wonderland to life. Whether the final product lives up to its ambitious vision is up for debate, but there's no denying that Burton and his team poured a ton of creativity into building this peculiar world. Alright, so now it's time to get real. Alice in Wonderland is a film that I can absolutely appreciate from a visual and technical standpoint. Burton, as always, has created a feast for the eyes, and there's no shortage of stunning and surreal imagery here. Danny Elfman's score, too, is hauntingly beautiful and genuinely complements the tone and atmosphere. It's immersive, it's magical, and it transports you to the dark, twisted world that only Burton could conjure up. So, in those respects, I can say Alice in Wonderland is ambitious and visually memorable. But here's where it falls apart. Beneath the CGI spectacle, there's not much holding it together. The story, in my opinion, is where the film misses the mark. Burton takes a well-loved classic and reimagines it with his signature style, but in doing so, something essential gets lost. The plot feels muddled and the film struggles to find a consistent emotional core. The pacing drags, and there's a sense that the story is more an excuse for impressive visuals than a meaningful narrative. Burton tries to weave in themes of identity and self-discovery, but they don't fully resonate because the characters themselves feel one-dimensional, and honestly, far more bizarre than relatable. Alice's journey, her internal struggle to find her place and purpose, should have been a compelling thread to draw us in, but instead it's overshadowed by the spectacle. By the time she's confronting the Jabberwocky, it feels like she's fulfilling a plot point rather than reaching any real sense of personal growth. And that's a shame because Burton has handled similar themes beautifully in his past work. Here, though, the story's emotional heartbeat gets lost in the noise of CGI and eccentricity. Overall, I'm giving Alice in Wonderland a 4 out of 10. It's a visual spectacle, sure, and you might find yourself awed by the design, the world building, and Elfman's music. But for all its ambition, the film feels hollow. It's a case of style over substance, where Burton's creative vision is all there, but the soul is nowhere to be found. It's like staring at a beautifully painted canvas that leaves you admiring the colors, but not really feeling anything else. Well, as we wrap up next time on Real Talk, we're going to dive into Dark Shadows, yet another Tim Burton and Johnny Depp collaboration that brings us into the world of vampires, family secrets, and a good dose of dark humor. Dark Shadows is definitely a unique one, blending gothic style with soap opera camp, so there's plenty to unpack. If you enjoyed this episode, you won't want to miss that one. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Rate us, leave us a review. It helps us to grow and keep making content that you'll enjoy. And also follow us over on Threads and Instagram at Real Talk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Alice in Wonderland. Do you agree with my take? Or is there something in this film that speaks to you on a deeper level? Did Burton's vision work for you in ways that it didn't for me? Let's keep the conversation going. As always, thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Whether we're celebrating the highs or dissecting the lows, I'm grateful to have you along for the ride. Until next time, keep watching, keep loving, and keep those reels rolling.